Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is Hotcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by iowa.rivals.com and Go Iowa Awesome. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Elliot Clough at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined today by publisher of Wildcat Report, Louie Vaccher, part of the Rivals Network. Louie, kind enough to join us on this Wednesday pod, Thursday if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, etc. Before we get too much into the matchup this weekend, Louie, I believe I heard somewhere that Northwestern's over-under to start the season for wins was like 2.5, and they're at
Two and a
4
half.
right now.
Yeah.
4 with 4 games left. How did this happen? How did the Northwestern Wildcats get here after such a dismal look to start the season, losing their head coach right before it starts, losing commits all over the place? How did we get here?
Yeah, it's been pretty stunning. I don't think anybody could have foreseen them being 4-4 at this point in the season. David Braun, I think they mishandled just about everything in the Pat Fitzgerald situation and the hazing scandal and firing him. It was a complete disaster. But one thing I think they got right is hiring David Braun. He's been absolutely amazing. He's done everything right. The players love him. They play hard for him, even in their losses. Those guys don't quit. And here they are, 4-4. They knocked off Maryland last week. They're 13.5-point underdogs at home. They got that big win against Minnesota. They're down 31-10 in the fourth quarter, came back and won it in overtime. They're playing a backup quarterback too. So they've had a lot of adversity, and this team has just come together. And I think that's what really he's done so well. They are together. They play hard for him. He's got them focused on football, and and then not only all the things you mentioned, but they're coming off a 1-11 season. They're four. Yeah, they've won 4 of their last 24 games over the last 2 years. So to be sitting here 4-4, and now we're talking about potential bowl bids. It's a pretty stunning turn, and it's David Braun has kind of won me over. I think if this continues, they win another game or two, and certainly if they become bowl eligible, I think you got to give him the permanent job.
I was just going to ask about that. Do you think, like, how do you think things pan out? Obviously, you can't look too far into the future with 4 weeks left in the season. Big Ten West, you never know what's going to happen. Do you think David Braun ends up getting this job?
Well, like I said, if he makes a bowl game with this team, I think you have to. I think the fan base will be completely behind it, and they would really have no other choice. And it's a trying situation right now because right now they don't know how much of the staff is going to come back. Because the thing is, too, they've got 5 coaches from the Fitzgerald era that they were there for the hazing stuff that went on, so they may want to get rid of those guys, even if they keep Braun. And, can Braun fill out a staff? I mean, the guy's been an FBS coach now for 6 months, or not 6 months, but since January, right? So hasn't been very long. They don't know how many transfers they could have at the end of the year, especially if they don't retain him. The athletic director is under fire right now. I just said the school president's feeling some heat. So everything is kind of up in the air. And then on top of it all, they're going to be homeless for the next 2 years. They're going to redo Ryan Field. So it's a challenging task in front of them. I didn't think he'd be the right guy for the job, but the guy has won me over. And he still has defensive coordinator duties. The defense has been much improved over the last couple of years. I think, like I said, if they make a bowl, you got to give them a job. I think for sure.
On top of decommits, folks transferring out, players transferring out, staffing issues with the Pat Fitzgerald era still lingering. It's not easy to get guys to transfer or to commit to Northwestern, especially considering the academic rigors and the academic standards. That's something a lot of people, I feel like, don't think about. I mean, obviously Northwestern is a very well-regarded school, but you pair that with football and it makes things a little bit
Oh, no
difficult.
question. Yeah, no question. I mean, they're ranked 9th in the U.S. News and World Report. It's an elite school. It's less than 10% acceptance rate now. So yeah, that makes it all the more challenging. That's always been there, but that's something that every coach has to face. And I think, Pat Fitzgerald was able to kind of turn that into a selling point over the years. And right now, David Braun has gotten some guys to commit this year with all this uncertainty around them. There's still guys that, showing confidence in him and the program. And a lot of it, I think, is because of the academic side. They realize the value of that. These are good students that value that degree from Northwestern. So that's part of the appeal, certainly. But yeah, that's just another thing that he's managed to do pretty well since he's been in place since July.
10% acceptance rate. I don't think I would have gotten into Northwestern. I can tell you that right now. Big
Well,
old.
I went to Northwestern a long time ago. I couldn't get in today. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I was gonna say big University of Northern Iowa energy right here on the
Oh, there we
podcast.
go.
So, but anyway, do you think this team would be where it's at right now with Pat Fitzgerald at the helm?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I I would think, yeah, probably. I think they certainly wouldn't have had, they had some guys transfer as soon as they fired him, and only one that was going to be a starter, but they lost a lot of depth. They started the season with 103 guys, which is low. Like, most teams are around 120. So they're down for sure in terms of depth. And to give him credit, he did hire David Braun. He did bring in those 5 assistants before any of this happened. So he saw the need to make some changes. So has David Braun changed the stuff happening on the field? He has from the defensive side, absolutely. Mike Bajakian still run the offense, and David Braun, I'll tell you, he kind of lets Bajakian have free reign of the offense. He doesn't meddle too much on that side of the ball because he is the defensive coordinator as well. So he's got kind of an interesting role as a head coach. I don't think they've changed that much appreciably on the field. I think they'd be, they might be around the same boat, something like that. I think they'd be in the neighborhood of 4-4 right now, certainly.
Better or for worse, he's letting his offensive coordinator run things on the offensive side of the ball. Seems like they're struggling so
Yeah.
far this season. Just 2.9 yards per carry on the ground. Just got over 105 rushing yards twice against the UTEP and Howard, and then the passing game over 210 passing yards against Minnesota and Maryland. Other than that, all under that 210 yards mark. Quarterback Ben Bryant was a starter until Penn State. Now it's Brandon Sullivan, like you mentioned at the top. What's this team's MO offensively? Where do they succeed? It doesn't appear that they find a spot to succeed on a regular basis. I think they're the second worst offense in the Big Ten, and the worst is Iowa.
Yeah,
Shocker.
who's the worst? Let's see. Yeah, so all the talk this year about Brian Ferentz and that 25 point per game, Northwestern's well under that. They're averaging what is it? They're 21.8 right now. So they're only 2.3 points per game below Iowa, right? And that got their coordinator fired. But Mike Bajakian, yeah, they've struggled this year and in years past. I mean, the offense has really struggled the last few years, certainly under him, the last 4. They haven't been able to run the ball. I thought that was the one thing that they'd try to hang their hat on this year was running the football, and they haven't. They're averaging less than 100 yards a game, which is like 120th in the country, worse than the Big Ten. That just hasn't happened for them. And their success this year has been through throwing the ball. Last week, Brendan Sullivan really had a breakout. So he had a tough game against Nebraska. The offense scored just 9 points, failed to score a touchdown. And then last week they put up 33. Sullivan had 265 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. He ran for 56. So it's going to have to be that way. They're not going to magically start running the ball against Iowa, that's for sure. And they're going to have to throw the ball. And the question is, can they protect them? Because that's, Northwestern's been sacked more than any team. I think they've given up 35 now, which is a lot. And even last week, Nebraska got them 8 times. They were much better against Maryland. Maryland still got them 5 times. So, and Sullivan's pretty mobile too. He's getting a lot of pressure. And then so it's going to be, can they protect him? And then can he make the right decisions and get the ball out on time. He has a tendency to hold it a little too long sometimes. So I don't think all those sack numbers, they're not necessarily always on the offensive line, but he's got to find ways to get the ball out on time, and they'll try to move the pocket and things like that to make it a little easier for him.
Now, my concern going into this game was all the things surrounding the Iowa program, and we'll talk about that here momentarily. But what you just said is definitely a positive for Iowa fans going into this game. Brennan Sullivan being a bit of a mobile guy, but also a quarterback that holds on to the ball too long. We saw that with Hudson Card and Purdue, and Iowa finished that game, I believe, with 6 sacks. And so I believe I would guess that Purdue's offensive line is better than Northwestern's based on the things that you've said. So that's definitely something that is advantageous for Iowa. Though I think YA Black it's not positive that he'll be out there. I think on the depth chart it was Michael Pittman. He's dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury, but I think the bye week should probably help with that. And Northwestern's probably thanking their lucky stars that Noah Shannon isn't available still.
Yeah. Yeah, that's big. It's been an issue for them all year protecting the quarterback, and it was even more so, I think, with Bryant, because Bryant is not as mobile as Sullivan. Sullivan can move around back there. I think Bryant's a better passer, but a little more accurate. But Sullivan does bring some dimension to the offense that they need, especially because they can't run the ball. He's often their only running game as well, so he's got a lot on his shoulders. And the offensive line, I think they've probably been the biggest disappointment for any unit on the Northwestern team this year. I thought they'd be a lot better. They do have some players that have played quite a bit of football. I mean, they lost a guy like Peter Skoronsky, right, a first-round draft pick, and they lost some guys, but they had some guys with quite a bit of experience, and they just they haven't executed. I think it's a lot of one-man breakdowns, and they're just having issues up there. And when you're facing a front like Iowa, that's going to be a primary concern: is can they keep Sullivan clean, at least give him some time to throw. The guy can make some plays for you, but they're going to have to give him a chance.
Looking back at some of the things that Iowa has done, and it's just part of football against quarterbacks that might be a little bit more mobile and that have dealt with some offensive line issues. Tanner Mordecai broke his hand when he went to throw the ball. He hit it on Jay Higgins' helmet, and then against Hudson Card, like I mentioned, they were all over him all day. And I think probably 85, maybe 90% of quarterbacks wouldn't have gotten up after some of the hits that Hudson Card took that day. So we'll see what happens with Sullivan being a backup guy and a guy who's a little bit more mobile on Saturday, of course. But where are the weapons for Sullivan in this offense? You mentioned his mobility. He is obviously the backup quarterback, and he had some success this last week against Maryland. But who are his top targets? Where is he going with the ball?
Yeah, that's one thing I think is a positive this year. They've been better than I thought they would be as the wide receivers. I think this is Northwestern's best starting group. Their 3 starters are better than they've had in the last decade, I'd say. They got AJ Henning, the transfer from Michigan, who's got some speed, right? He can stretch a defense, and that's something we don't see in Evanston very often. He's got some speed and he can make some plays. And sometimes they just try to give him the ball in space, with screen passes and things like that. Just try to get him and get the ball in number 8's hands and let him go to work. Bryce Kurtz is a guy finally healthy this year. He's got a little bit of speed as well. He had a monster game against Minnesota, 10 catches, 215 yards, which is the most by a Wildcat receiver since 1980. So he's been a big weapon. And then Cam Johnson, another transfer. He came from Vanderbilt and then Arizona State. He's kind of he's like 205 pounds, 210 pounds. He's a physical receiver, your possession guy that can go over the middle and get some contested balls for you. So those 3 guys, give him some weapons in there if he can get some time. And then, Cam Porter is their main running back. I think, on Saturday, like I said, I don't expect them to be able to run the ball effectively, but they got to do enough just to keep the defense honest, so they're not pinning their ears back and coming after them and, registering double-digit sacks or something like that. They've got to at least run enough to keep them honest out there.
Speaking of pinning the ears back, getting after the quarterback, I look at the stats for the defense at Northwestern and tried to kind of find some similarities between their wins, and it's kind of all over the place with how they were able to be successful defensively. 6 sacks, 9 tackles for loss against Maryland, as well as a fumble recovery and a pick. 4 sacks, 3 picks against UTEP. Offense was just better than Minnesota and Howard in those 2 wins. But is this a quintessential Big Ten West defense where they're keeping everything in front of you, playing zone? Where are their best? I guess by the sounds of it, yeah, it's David Braun. He's leading the defense, and he's a guy that Pat Fitzgerald brought in. So, how do they operate, and what are their strengths?
Yeah, I think you hit it. They are a bend but don't break. So that's the bend but don't break. That's what Mike Hankwitz, who was the defensive coordinator for 13 years at Northwestern, had a lot of success. That's what they did. They played a lot of cover 4 on the back end, kept everything in front of them, make you earn it. If you're going to go down the field, it's going to take you 10, 12 snaps to score. And that's kind of what they're doing this year. That's what they do well. Their tackling has improved a lot during the year. But the thing we've seen the last couple of weeks against Nebraska and last week against Maryland, they're starting to make some plays. Against Maryland, they had 6 sacks, like you mentioned. They also had 2 turnovers. They got 2 turnovers against Nebraska. So these last 2 weeks, Northwestern's been on the plus side of the turnover margin, 4-1. So they're taking care of the ball, and they're creating some takeaways. And when you're a team struggling offensively like they are, those are huge. They've got to win the turnover battle if they want to beat Iowa. They got to play a smart, clean football game, and maybe take 1 or 2 away, and get an upper hand that way. I think that's really, I don't think they're going to outplay them. They're going to have to get a little help, and the defense has been making some plays a little bit more as the season's gone on.
I mean, with the worst offense in college football coming to town, I have a feeling some things are going to work for Northwestern on Saturday. 3 turnovers for Deacon Hill against Minnesota a couple weeks ago. He had those 2 fumbles and the pick. I think he has to quote Chad Lysicote for finding this stat from the Des Moines Register, he has the most turnover worthy plays in college football over this last time span between, tipped balls and obviously throwing some ill-advised passes, fumbles, etc. Going to be looking for him to be more secure, especially in the pocket with the ball, because just about every time he dropped back against Minnesota, they were swinging at the ball, and it worked for him twice. And that's all the amount that they needed it to work for him. Going into that game. But like I mentioned, Brian Ferentz situation, everything that's going on with Northwestern, having this, 4-4 is, well, it's 500, right? But it's a successful season in the grand scheme of things for Northwestern with where they're at right now. Coming off this win, it's in Wrigley. This game is in Wrigley. Iowa just lost to Minnesota. You've got the Brian Ferentz situation. Would you say, based on the read that you can get from this team, from the staff, Wildcats, they roaring and ready to go? Is that sort of the mindset for them where they're ready to attack and go after a team that might be kind of in the dumps right now? And Kirk Ferentz doesn't have a great history coming off the bye week either. Is this a team that's approaching this like any other game? Do you think that they're you mentioned pinning their ears back and really going to go after it this time around against the Hawkeyes in Wrigley?
Yeah, they're feeling pretty good. They're feeling pretty good about themselves. I think their confidence is pretty high. I thought that Nebraska loss was devastating. I really did. I thought if they wanted to make a bowl, they had to win that game. And for the offense, the defense played a heck of a game, and the offense just couldn't get anything going, and they sputtered and couldn't get a touchdown. They lose 17-9. So coming off of that, I thought they were pretty down. And then, they had to steal one to be able to get back on track, so to speak. And they did it on Saturday. I don't think anybody thought they would beat Maryland, and certainly no one thought they'd score 33 points to do it. That was unbelievable. Just an offensive explosion. So I think they're feeling pretty good. I think Wrigley Field will be interesting environment. Northwestern's 4-1 at home this year. We'll see if it carries over a few miles south to Wrigley Field and how that works out. And I expect there's going to be at least as much and probably more black and gold and purple and white in the stands. I think Iowa fans certainly are fired up about this. But yeah, they're excited to play, and yeah, they're in conversations for bowl game. But if it doesn't happen, this is sort of like a bowl game atmosphere. You're playing in a neutral site. There's a lot of fanfare. It's pretty cool. They've Northwestern's done it a couple times in the past, and it's a unique kind of event. So it's something I think the kids look forward to. But one thing about Northwestern this year, they have not lost or won 2 games in a row all year. They're up and down. They lost the opener, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. So we'll see if they can put 2 weeks in a row together and see if they can notch another W, because they've been on a yo-yo, but their play has improved throughout the year, but they're still, they haven't been able to win 2 in a row. And to their credit, they don't lose a 2 in a row either. So.
You covered a football game in Wrigley before?
Yeah. I was at both of them in 2010, they played Illinois. In 2021, 21, they played Purdue. Yeah.
What do you think about it as a football venue?
Oh, it's cool. I mean, it's different. I mean, it's such an iconic park. And that first year, I don't know if you remember, they played you kind of make it, take it. You remember they only went toward one end zone because of the clearance on one side. So that was kind of unique, and you'll have both teams on the same sideline. That's kind of different. And but the surroundings are cool, and it's like I said, it's kind of like you'll feel it, if you're at the game, or the Iowa writers and stuff. It's almost kind of like a bowl game atmosphere. It's cool just to be there, and the marquee and the bleachers and the scoreboard and all that kind of stuff. It's cool. You'll enjoy it for sure.
I will be there. I've never been to Wrigley. I lived in Iowa my whole life, pretty close to Chicago, and relatively close to Chicago, and I've never been to Wrigley.
Yeah.
So first time will be for a
it,
football game. So
it'll be cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. Now, as we start to wind down here, expectations for this weekend. What are you expecting, score, etc.? And before we get into that, I'll let you know. Spread, I just saw it on ESPN. It's up to 31 now. Was it 29 and a half? We're above 30, baby. That's all we got. But spread is 5. What are you expecting? How things shake out, final score, all that.
Yeah. And the spread's come down too, right? Didn't it open? Wasn't there like 8 or 7.5 or something like that?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
I think so. I think that number's going down and the over/under is going up. I expect it to be a low-scoring game. I don't think last week, Northwestern scored 33. I don't think they're going to be able to do anything near that against Iowa this week, unless they get a whole lot of help. I think it's going to be a game in the teens, 17, 13, 14, 10, that kind of old kind of, rock'em sock'em Big Ten West football. And, I saw a tweet this week, the 25-point magic number that Ferentz had, that no Big Ten West team right now is averaging 25 points a game, which I think is comical, right? That's pretty much, I'm going to miss the West. I'll tell you that. And I know Northwestern will too, because it's going to be awfully hard to ever get back to Indianapolis now with, USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, and the West is gone. That's going to be tough. But beside the point, I expect a low-scoring game. I expect a team that makes the fewest mistakes will probably win the game. I don't think either team is going to be able to do too much offensively. I think, Iowa has the upper hand defensively. I think Northwestern's got a little bit of an upper hand offensively. I can't believe I just said that, but it's true. That's the way this season's gone. That's pretty amazing. So it's taking care of the football, whoever makes the fewest mistakes, that kind of stuff, that old boring Big Ten West stuff that we love so much, right?
Final score?
I'll tell you what, going into this week, I thought for sure I'd be taking Iowa. The more I look at the numbers, I'm kind of just starting to do my, number crunching and analysis and looking at highlights and things like that. Boy, I don't know. This game is going to be up for grabs. I think Northwestern can win this game. It's going to come down to whether they can protect Sullivan and stay out of 3rd and longs and things like that, where Iowa's really going to be able to get after them, so can they make some yards on 1st down, find some ways to move the sticks, stay on schedule at least. So it's going to be little things like that. It's going to be in the teens. Like I said, I haven't made my pick yet. I came into the week thinking Iowa. I'm up in the air now. I don't know. How about you?
I changed mine up until I post on our premium board and we have everybody pop in right now. Sitting down and preparing, given everything that's just happening right now with Iowa, bye week, et cetera, like we mentioned just a moment ago, my initial gut reaction was, I think Northwestern's going to pull this out. After looking at the stats, just how bad they are offensively, still better than Iowa, but still bad.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to take the Hawkeyes 13-9. I think wind is definitely going to factor into that as well. If it is super windy, I'll probably take like 10-6 Iowa or like 10-3 Iowa. It's just all contingent on that and the Northwestern offense and the Iowa defense, because I don't know how much you listen to Kirk's presser. I know you heard, you mentioned you'd heard a clip or two, but Deacon Hill's still QB1.
Yeah.
So that I just don't see how the offense operates with a guy who is more mobile than an injured Cade McNamara, but still not quite as mobile as Molasses. And Joe Labus is still QB2, and Deacon Hill having so many turnover worthy plays. I could see a scenario where Northwestern pulls it out. I'm obviously going to take the under because that's what you do for every Iowa football game.
Yeah.
But I'm not a bettor, not a guy who bets on sports. But if you are, hammer the under every single time. 13-9. That's my prediction for now. We'll post on our premium board tomorrow about score predictions. If you want to be part of that, you can head over to iowa.rivals.com/subscribe and be a premium subscriber. You can do the same thing on northwestern.rivals.com if you're a Northwestern fan, and go ahead and follow Louie Vaccher on Twitter at Wildcat Report. There does great work for our Rivals contingent there in Chicago. Louie, we appreciate you hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Elliot. It was a pleasure, and look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Sounds good. We'll wrap it up here. We appreciate you tuning in to this episode of Hawkcast, brought to you by iowa.rivals.com. If you are not a premium subscriber yet, like I mentioned, you can head over to iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. You're getting all the information on the Brian Ferentz situation, football, basketball, recruiting, more as well with basketball and football. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you are listening: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and then, of course, YouTube. Leave a comment. Let us know your score prediction for this game on Saturday. Does Iowa pull it out? Drop a like while you're there as well. For now, we'll see you next time.